Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Sprung. A great season finale, a beautiful season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. When I saw only one episode up this week, I was like, oh, that's weird. Only 9 episodes, but then I saw the run time. I was like, oh, it's basically 2 episodes in one. Either way, jam-packed episode. The fact is, it was interesting finding out that Jack and Gloria were dating a lot longer. I thought they'd only been dating a little while. I guess it's like, right, how, despite dating for like 4 years, like, how would you ever find out that Jack was lying about his circumstances? But I love that it's like, oh, they were dating for quite a while. That was a straight-up committed relationship. They've been dating since like 2016, so... interesting. I thought it was like a lot less time. So that's, 2016 might not even been the beginning. It might go back further. But either way, I thought that was interesting. I also love Jack being in that class, and that guy, he's like, yeah, I'm in this class because he's like, I want to be able to, he's like, I want to be able to have bigger words. So when it came to my parole hearing, it's like, I want to talk to the parole, what are they called? And Jack's like, bored. He's like, bored? He's like, I'll stab you or something like that. Because that's the same dude that slipped a pencil in his sock. And Jack knows, and he was like, shh, shh, shh. So you're like, okay, somebody's getting shift tonight. I also love that guy being like, oh, the papers called out my manifesto, so he wanted to like be able to write a better manifesto. And so I'm like, Jesus. And I forgot what it was. Jack used some very big word, and the guy behind him was like, yo, that sounds like a big word. I bet you, are there any numbers in it? Sounds like there's a number. And then Jack's like, yeah, there's gotta be like an 8 somewhere near the end there. So I even love the teacher later on was like, oh, like, you have to write about something you're passionate about. And the guy's like, what rhymes with meth? Everyone in the classroom, death. So he's like, all right. So I love that. I also love, just really quickly, just because it's on my mind, I love that Josh Wolf popped up. I mean, first you got Joey Coco Diaz, and it's like, in like 1 or 2 episodes, and like being a cellmate, and now it's like, oh, I wonder were there other comedians sprinkled in now, but it's like, I know Joey, and I know Josh Wolf, so that was interesting. And it was so effed up, it's like, right, he was the answer that... part of the answer that Jack needed to kind of help with the heist, but I love that it's like, and you find out who Josh's character is in the show, you're like, oh, God, but Jack knocks him the hell out with a book. I'm like, yeah, he's that type of criminal. I mean, to be fair, those type of criminals do not get love in prison. They are considered the scummiest of scum, so it's like, yeah. I wasn't expecting that twist, and he was like, oh, you get pictures of the kids, too, and he winks. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. But nevertheless, in the main focus of the episode, Gloria's frustrated because time is running out. The fact is that they're only going to have like 1 day before they have to kind of strike now while the iron is hot. Like, they have to get this all ready and prepared by tomorrow. But they're going to need a whole bunch of other information. Like, they can't log into the account because they don't have... the login information necessary. And I love that Gloria is so mean to Jack. It's like, hey, he was locked up for 26 years, so he doesn't know about the whole, like, because he thought, like, oh, we just pressed this whole forgotten password thing. And it's like, oh, really, Jack? And it's like, oh, he's like, you were being sarcastic. It's like, he had a very, like, Rooster and Barb moment there, because that was something Barb, but it's funny that Jack is kind of like the smarter of at least those two, and he's the one kind of bumbled like that. Once again, he's a man out of time to some extent. Also love Barb's like, right, my young sexy boyfriend might not exist, but my fat knees do, so I need to work on that, which Jack's like, you don't have fat knees. She's like, you really don't think I do? And even later on, he's like, yeah, Barb's all about her fat knees, which I think she's like crazy about that. It's like, no, her knees are perfectly great. Which there's a part of me almost thinking that's really sweet, because I know, I mean, at least my understanding is, like, both of their characters were together. I think they were the grandparents in, Raising Hope, weren't they? Like, anyone that's ever seen Raising Hope, do correct me on that, but, so there's almost like a little sweet underlining element of him saying that to her, that is almost like, there's some sweetness to it, because, like, the characters they played were a couple, and, like I said, Raising Hope, at least in my understanding. None of the ideas are panning out on what they're going to do because they've got such a limited amount of time. They were trying to, like, the husband got in the way when the congresswoman was putting in the password, so they don't have the password. Jack was actually talking to his parents and they ended up giving him an idea, which I love. His mom is hiding underneath the table. She's like, I know you locked up for so long. Did you ever want to kill one of your cellmates? And she's like, I want to do that to your father. Because all he does is talk about what he ate, what he ate before, what he's eating now, and what he's going to eat later. And she's just like, I'm going to kill him. And it's like, even at one point, she's like, put your balls away. It's almost like your leg is blowing a bubble or something. It's just like, she's just so done with him. It's like, yeah, well, you're trapped with someone for that long. I mean, it also plays into so many relationships suffered because of COVID. COVID killed a lot of relationships. It's kind of a poor choice of words using that, but like a lot of people broke up, probably a lot of marriages too, just because being trapped that long with someone, it just kind of put a lot of strain on a lot of relationships. So some didn't pan out because of the pandemic. So it kind of almost leans into that. But it's like, right, you probably already kind of like, you've already gone through the rough patch, so you're just kind of like, whatever, I'm gonna just sleep under the table to avoid being around you. He's like, yeah, your mom left me. But it's like, yeah, like people are making extra money by tutoring, so he decides to take advantage of this. And I love that one of the people he learned from was Melvin, because Melvin's, and I like that. I thought that's so neat. That had to been like, I wonder was that like one of the last time when previously before they kidnapped that dude, but Melvin was driving, so I don't know if that was back before like Rooster and Jack set him up. Either way, him giving advice talking about his cousin, I love that's applicable in this case. So that making fake emails and stuff, and it was really sweet. The whole Lucia's son, it's like, yeah, helping him like write a fake report. Like a story so that he could get all the information needed to answer the questions so they could like get the change the password and whatnot for authentication. And it was actually really sweet where it's like Jack was like, yeah, I had to stay on a little longer because he was like dealing with some other stuff that he couldn't quite get. It was like the teacher and Jack kind of came out even in that moment, even though you kind of were using the kid. And it's like, yeah, that beautifully worked out in the end. And I was like, yeah, that was actually pretty damn smart. So it's like, cool, we're going to run through the plan. And Jack's drawing pictures of everyone. It's like, okay, here's Wiggles and Rooster getting married. And here's me with my parents. And this is, once again, Barb with her niece, which I think she's crazy. He's like, oh, so what are you going to do? She's like, someone's got a martini in my hand, because his parents had convinced him, like, hey, just ask her to come with you. And it's like, right, it's a scary thing, because it's like every time he wants to talk to her about it, he kind of gets a little scared to like actually bring up the conversation. So everyone's got their respective roles. I love that Rooster had his. He was supposed to, he's like, yeah, but like, what's my motivation of my character? And Jack's helping him come up with the background. He's like, backstory. He's like, that's good. And it's like, yeah. And I love that just like every time you turn around, the plan kind of fell through. It's like, right, pretending to be FBI agents, grabbing Colin and his boyfriend. It's like Colin has no loyalty. It's like, oh yeah, because like Colin's boyfriend points out his, it's like, oh, his dead career. It's like, my dead career. It's the only thing that's keeping us afloat when you're chasing your dream. He's like, hey, he's like, dance is not a dream. He was basically like, it's a calling or something like that. But I love they're like, right, what you're going to do is you're going to pick up the congresswoman and you're going to play this role of like, stop in a dead zone when we tell you to, because like, yeah, we know all about what you've been up to. The fact is that you are frauding the government, so we're going to bust you for all of that. So you're going to help us with this sting. But he says no, which is like, wait, what do you mean no? It's like, it's like, kind of trying to be like, okay, this ain't going to be no picnic. I don't like picnics. It's not going to be a beach. It's like, and it's too much sand. It's like, Jesus, come on, guy. It's like, what about your boyfriend? It's like, well, he goes down so easy. He's like, what does that mean? Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm like, yo, come on. Oh, man. It's like, you're so focused on like getting, like chewing each other out under these circumstances. So it's like, cool, Colin can't be the driver, so it's got to be up to Jack. And I love that he butt dial Melvin was like, yo, you up to something? Are you doing a job without me, Jack? He's like, no, of course not. And he's like, right, if you go into the store, like return something, could you pick me up some Lady Raiders? So he's like, what? He's like, yeah, a lady, like, shaved my leg once. He's like, once you kind of done that, felt that smoothest, you never go back. And Jack's like, honestly, that's good advice. I'll keep that in mind. And he like butt dials him later again. I'm like, stop putting it in your back pocket, Jack. Don't put your phone in your back pocket anymore. You're screwing up. I'm surprised they didn't just eventually bring Melvin into the fold with this whole heist, but it's like, right, we're already enough people involved, so we don't need to add any more people. It's like, well, Wiggles is part of the family now. What was it? She pulled cheese off the wall because she thought it like, I was like, oh, she treats it like his Willy Wonka wallpaper. It's like, oh, that poor, basically it was like, oh, like her head is, oh, she's such an idiot, but God bless her soul or something like that. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, it was something of that ilk. I even love it later on when Gloria was like, right, we're going to need Wiggles to read the script. I know she's like, I shouldn't be asking this, but can she read? And Barb's like, fair question. And he's like, Bruce is like, yeah, she can read. And it's like, can she? He's like, I think so. She's like, have you seen her do it? It's like, well, I've seen her read like the back of like sunscreen lotion and stuff. It's like, all right, we'll go for that. I also love Barb and Stan. She was initially like, oh, I don't want to flirt with Stan, and she's reading the cards. And then Stan got real freaky naughty. And then Barb was like, oh, he's got a nipple piercing, and she's like, oh, you did it for me? I was like, yo, Barb's feeling it. It is a little weird that you're doing this in front of your mom, too. That's cringe, bro. That's the most, cringing like the most, like, oh my god, that makes me uncomfortable. It's like your mom's back there because she thought she was picking, like, oh, is this a raisin, or is this a mole? Oh, it's a mole, and I'm bleeding a lot. And Barb's like, oh, you need to take me now. And he's like, talking, he's going to bend her like a pretzel. I'm like, yo! Because he had said that he had looked up what a woman needs or something like that. And he's like referencing like the two of them orgasming and everything. And Barb's like, oh my god. So she puts out like that, like, flight attendant, uniform, and she's just like, yeah, it was kind of like something we banged it out what I was wearing when we hooked up in like the 80s or something like that. And she's like, yeah, I thought it'd make it a little nostalgic. So when the time came, that's like, yeah, she's like, oh, will this get Stan in trouble? Which I'm like, wow, you could not stand Stan before, but now knowing like, right, it's just, I mean, it's also like they've hooked up in the past, but I think in this moment, like him kind of showing like how far he's willing to go for her. And, you know, it's like, oh, with him talking dirty like that, it's like, yo, Stan, you're like an animal, you know, and I thought that was sweet. So, and she's like, right, this isn't going to like affect Stan. He's not going to get fired. And he's like, no, Stan's not going to get fired. She's like, promise. And I love that it just like turns it to them like her, Gloria yanking on, her, Barbara's hair. I also love the whole situation of the congresswoman. She was talking to her grandma when she was talking about some of that COVID stuff. You're like, man, you are just an evil, evil person. They kind of, I mean, that's why Gloria was like wanting to go after you the way she has. And Jack getting stopped by the cop, and it ended up being Rooster. And it's like, and you know, Wiggles. What was it? Oh, they're like, oh, can you read it? She's like, oh yeah, like I got a perfect score on the SAT for the verbal stuff, but I got a 0 on the math. And they said like no one's did it before or since. And she's so proud of it. It's like, hey, that's an accomplishment. But also she's like, yeah, like I keep him distracted for hours, the cop. And it's like, yeah, that's why they call me Wiggles. He's like, oh, I thought it was because of the wigs. And she's like, basically, she meant to be like, oh, it's because of both. It's kind of like a double entendre. But I love him rolling up as that cop. And he's like, yeah, like, I mean, having dealt with cops a lot of his life, of course he can play that role without too much stress. And I love that it's just like, all right, count back from the letter T. And he starts doing it, and then Rooster hits him. He was like, I was doing it, you bastard. And then real cops showed up being like, oh yeah, there's a highway chase. We need a, you know, it's like, oh, my brother's in Blue Nemi. So like Rooster actually goes off with them and actually helps. And it's like, hey, it's like, oh, would you think you get away, scumbag, or something? He said like something very cliche. And I love that so much. And he ends up, oh, the other cops chase after the criminal and he bails. It's like, oh, in another life, Rooster could really kill it in this cop situation, which would be the beautiful irony, him being the criminal he is. So luckily that all worked out. Gloria getting to Andy, I'm about to call him Andy, Stan, understandable slip why I said Andy, but pretending to be Lucia, and also Barb just doing everything she can to be like, I need a man who's going to be spontaneous. He's like, just give me 10 minutes. She's like, you've got 3. And once again, Wiggles doing her thing in a strip club and reading. It's like, multitasking like that cannot be easy. So, but luckily things went down without a hitch. Your boy and Stan and Barb went into the vault and did their thing. It's like, everyone's coming out a winner. They got them transfer, and Colin finally got free, but he doesn't know that they're being robbed. He thinks it's the actual FBI, which immediately the councilwoman's like, oh my god, it's the deep state. They're listening to me. They're on to me. So it's like, cool. So they do kind of get away with everything. And then just them celebrating at the end. We won. It's like, yeah, I thought you said this was going to work. She's like, I lied. She lied. Yeah. And then Barb celebrating, being like, oh, Stan didn't get penalized or whatever. And she's like, oh, like shows her neck. I think he gave her a hickey, I think. Either way, they're celebrating. Wiggles, Rose, and everyone's like, shake and read. And it's just like, yeah. I'm like, I was scared the entire ending because I'm like, is something going to go wrong? It feels like something's easily going to go wrong, and I'm scared out of my mind. But then, like, everything kind of worked out in the end. But it comes to the final thing, well, what? Now he has all his ID and stuff because Gloria had it already set up ahead of time. But she's like, no, I needed you around for a little while longer. But it's like, yeah, I just needed Jack a little bit longer. So here you go, Rick. Here's all your new identification. So she's planning to go to Miami, and he wants to go to San Diego to be with his parents. And his mom told him, to kind of nut up. She told him that twice. He's like, Mom, stop saying that. I also love the whole thing of avoid Missouri or Louisiana. I think it was, yeah, right. Avoid Missouri. Take I-40 if you don't want your woman stolen from you. Because it's like, his mom was like, yeah, this guy was hitting on me or whatever. And your dad was so certain that he was a sex trafficker or something like that. It's like, jeez. But I love that, and I think it's such a sweet moment because you can even tell it's not just Jack. Gloria's feeling and vibing too, that it's like she is kind of beating herself up a little bit. It's, oh, I should have said something. And I thought it was beautiful for it all come full circle where it's like, oh, let's use the wall as a bit of a barrier. And so when she, they kind of treat it like the toilets back in prison. And she's like, no, like come to Miami with me. We could end up like, scamming so many people. It could be fun. Like going to Miami is my dream, but maybe it's just because something else is missing there. And Jack is feeling that he's living in thought. Like the fact is that, and that thing that speaks volumes that usually he'd be the one that takes the lead in that. I love the whole thing. He's like, oh yeah, like, what we did was the best thing that never happened to me. But her taking the lead speaks volumes. Like, I think for her, she was never really too eager to put her heart out there just for it to kind of get stomped on. But now, because she was feeling this just as much as Jack was, but for him, it's like, but, after all these years away from his parents, he wants to get his parents out of that home, and he wants them to be together, all of them together again after all this time. And so he's asking her to come to San Diego with her. But it's like, oh, we'll double date with your parents and like get like the early bird special or something. He's like, yeah, well, nothing says glamorous that, but sure. And it's just right. They both want two different things. They both have two different dreams. And it's because they're so different, it just can't align. And both of them leaning their heads against the wall. You're like, man, I was hoping it would work out. So everyone kind of going their separate ways. And the fact is, Melvin, the story he's kind of been told is like, right, you kidnapped the guy in my truck and that guy had a ticket and you won the lottery. It's like, yep, that's sure as hell what happened. I'm like, okay, I was wondering what story you told Melvin. He got most of the story right, but he kind of did walk away the most with nothing. He lost his girl, he lost the toilet paper, his car, well, he got thrown in jail, plus his car got taken and was also part of a crime of kidnapping and torturing a guy, and that guy dropped the quote-unquote golden ticket that made them a whole bunch of money. So he's like, man, I got screwed out of this deal left and right. But him saying goodbye to everyone, first Wiggles, and she's like, bye, Jeff. She's like, yeah, I'm not really into white guys. She's like, I'm not really into white guys, but some people are, so you'll find love. Because he's like, yeah, I hope I get to find someone just like Rooster, you and Rooster found each other. And, hey, Rooster, my brother from another mother. And it's like, I'm glad you're nothing like my brothers because I used to try to shove cigarettes in my mouth. So it's like, right, here's to being a better brother or something. And him and Barb, and she's like, I know. He's like, yeah, thanks for taking me in. And she's like, right, the wounded animals and strays that my son has ever brought home, you and her gal pal, which I don't know if I noticed that before that Gloria saved in her phone as gal pal. It's like, you two are the best strays that ever walked in our home. And it's like, you're always welcome here. Like, when you get tired of your real family, you'll always have a place here. Also, if even if I'm not here, well, you know how to break in. So you've already proved that you can do that. So that was really sweet. I was almost kind of hoping it'd be that like typical like cliche romantic comedy thing of Gloria chasing after him and like maybe at the last second when she was going to get on her flight to Miami, she instead went to San Diego. But it's like, no, they both still went their separate ways. And Wiggles and Rooster getting married, Stan and Barb, I think they are going more official couple. They're getting their vaccine shots and they kiss and everything. I even love the whole like, oh, Trump was funny because now it's like Biden's president, which you're like, man, that's not just like a Barb crazy. It's like a lot of people felt that way. They're like, oh, it's kind of a bummer. Like, regardless of it all, the way Trump was in office, he was wilding, he was funny. Either way. But them getting their shot together and kissing, I was like, oh, that's super adorable. Everything kind of blew up in the Congresswoman's face. At the very least, it's like, right, she ended up losing out on the opportunity. She lost all that money. They made sure to give like $100,000 to Lucia, so it's like, right, her and her family can be taken care of. Because she was only a part of this because she thought like, oh, there's really going to be a transfer of like, a college tuition thing for my son. She's not a bad person. She was just so doing what they could to help. I even love that Gloria was even saying like, oh, we could go to like, Miami, we could rip people off and, give the, money to people and say like, I like, the thought of doing nice things like that. Like the fact is she was so on board, but it's just like, once again, they had to be two separate approaches, two separate dreams. I even love that Melvin's like, yeah, you're trying to live with old people, Jack. Don't include stairs. You're trying to kill somebody? He's like, right. And I also love them pointing out that they made sure to still avoid Missouri. I wonder, was that really Jack following his dad's advice, or was that Melvin being like, no, your dad's right about that? And him being reunited with his family was so beautiful too. I'm like, this is just like, this season finale hit you with all the feels, homie, and I love it so much. And Jack getting hired as a teacher, and then we see him kind of sending the students off for like summer vacation, and Gloria, still doing her thing, but coming across a Kit Kat wrapper because that was the last thing she sent Jack off with. So, God, that sounded so weird the way I said it. She left Jack a Kit Kat before he went to San Diego because that sounded phrasing. God. Either way, I thought that was just kind of a nice way to kind of wrap things up. And it's just, yeah, like they might all kind of be down their separate paths, but they could always find their way back to each other. At the time of me recording this, it hasn't been announced whether or not the show is coming back for a second season or not. I wonder, was this season purposely written kind of like almost like Leverage, if because it almost has that same feeling vibe to it, kind of that comedy, like crime drama element to some extent. Once again, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. Most of Leverage was kind of written in a way where, especially the first season, but I think every subsequent season too was written in a way where it's like, okay, every season's resolved. That way, in case they never got another season, this show would have a proper ending. And leaving things open enough, but it's like, this kind of feels like that. Like, enough is open for there still being plenty more story to tell, but they kind of set out to do what they did and everything would be resolved. So everything kind of walked away everything was completely resolved. So it all worked out in the end. So if they wanted to end the show, they could end it here, but I don't want it to. I want them to keep making the show because it's this nice, like, feel good show. It's like, once again, it's like, it gives you that same feeling, at least to me, like Leverage does. It's one of those feel good type of shows. And, I wanted this to continue because I want things to even be a bigger, happier. I mean, have, Wiggles and, Rooster with, Super Paco. And it's like, oh, right. And Rooster being like, oh, I'm thinking that too. She's like, so we're talking about baby names, right? And you're like, oh, I love you, Wiggles. Get more Melvin, him and Jack being buddies, maybe even get him involved in some of the heists going forward. How much changes for Jack and, Gloria while they were away. Like, did they, in a complicated situation, like, was Jack still waiting and, didn't meet with anyone, or did Gloria meet someone? Did something you could see a complication like that happening? Barb and Stan, are they still a thing? Is Stan's mom still around? Type of situation. That'd be interesting too. If it's Barb kind of has to help in that regard. Right, because I was like, there was that whole thing of they sent the pizza with no toppings or cheese, which is you basically just sent bread. I was like, that's such interesting timing, because I just saw a TikTok about that, where someone's I don't know if they set it up like that or not, but it was just yeah, they just sent us to crust, no cheese, no tomato sauce or nothing. But in this case, it's it's because Wiggles opened it upside down, and it's yeah, my future daughter-in-law was defeated by a cardboard box. I'd love to get more with that. It'd be interesting if Jean Michael's father came back into the picture, was oh, I'm here to win you back, Barb, type of situations. Whether anything will happen with that or not, we'll see. I mean, her and Stan might be happy, but it might be it was fun for a while, but maybe Barb got tired and it's but maybe it's still a thing of, yeah, we broke up. And then we had sex again, and then we broke up, and then, but we've had sex 3 more times after their second breakup, because it's kind of been part of their pattern. So I would just love to see where a season 2 would take us. What other crazy shenanigans and what kind of other high stakes, especially because Jack's oh, I'm no criminal, especially now that he's a teacher. Why would he want to kind of abandon all that now? So that's where the thing of almost it has his happy ending, but I feel there's still so much story you could tell. But I think, like I said, I think it's written because you want to resolve everything, but also, kind of give it kind of that type of feel for any show where it's right, every season being the overarching story, and just kind of having shenanigans filled adventures in between. I would just, I'd love to see what a season 2 would encounter. What kind of bad guys would they rob? What would be the big score? Did Barb go through with any of the surgeries, in particular, the knee surgery and stuff? It's no, because probably not, because obviously she's beautiful the way she is. I'm sure Stan would agree. So I'll just have to keep an eye out for that. I mean, typically networks usually look into that stuff well in advance. To be fair, the season finale just dropped 2 hours ago. Well, 2 hours and 12 minutes ago at the time of me, actually recording this. So we'll probably keep an eye out for the next couple of days and see if Freevee has any announcement. I like I said, my fingers crossed, hoping we get a season 2. So. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.